Great. Well, let me officially welcome you to our Earth Day presentation today with Ann Coddington. My name is Laura Mitchell, and I am the Executive Director of Visions Art Museum. And I'm joined here not only with Ann, but with my colleagues Vanessa Segura and Rebecca Deep. Vanessa is managing the hosting, and so if there's an issue, please feel free to direct message her if there's any troubleshooting that needs to be done. We have the chat open and available to everyone, so you can message the whole group, or you can, I always say, send notes to one another in class using the private chat if you like. We are recording, so if you do not want your face to be visible on this recording, please use the stop video function. And also we ask that everybody keep themselves muted unless you're speaking, just to cut down on the cross noise. So thank you very much for that and welcome. And we are going to begin with Rebecca showing us the Earth Day exhibition that's up in the museum right now.
Hi, everybody. Yes, Rebecca here live at the museum, which is open today. So excited that we are back to being open. As Laura said, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 10 to 2. And that will give you the opportunity to see all of the current exhibitions, including this in our spotlight gallery, our long-awaited Earth Day exhibition, postponed from 2020. This will be up until May 2nd. We've got works from Nancy Lemke, Lisa Yoder. We've got pieces by Carol Larson and Colleen Pitts. So Shannon Applegate with her student, Josie Martin. So please come to see this exhibition. It will be here until May 2nd. And then after that, we will have Carolyn Harper with her exhibition, Look Me in the Eye. And be sure to join us for the event that will be accompanying that exhibition with my friend Jim Lovell, social worker here in San Diego, will give us a little look at the issues behind homelessness and all the issues that, all the problems that, I don't know how to say this, just all of the issues that the homeless face and how we respond to that. So please join us for that and come see the show by May 2nd. Enjoy.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. Yes, and we do hope to see you for Carolyn Harper's work. And also Rebecca reminded me that we have lots of events coming up, and to learn about those events, you can go to our website and click on Education and Events and see the list of things that are coming up, including that conversation with Jim Lovell, which I'm sure is going to be extremely enlightening. And we also have a 3-part series with Professor Sue Gonda, who's a women's history professor, talking about the women's suffrage movement and interviewing some of the artists featured in Deeds Not Words about their artistic choices in representing the themes and personalities of women's suffrage movement the way that they did. So it should be a really great interdisciplinary conversation. And there were so many artists who were eager to speak with Sue about this that we actually have 3 events devoted to that topic. And the themes within each event are detailed on the website. So lots of fun things coming up, and we'll hope to see you all at those as well. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to our featured speaker, Ann. And I'm assuming and trusting that you've all had a chance to look at her bio and all of that, what we sent out in email. And I don't want to waste any time just talking about that. I'll let Ann introduce herself, and we'll get going on the wonderful things that she has to share with us.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. Let me minimize so I can see what I'm doing here. Thank you so much for joining me. And I wanted to say thank you to Vanessa and Laura and the Visions Art Museum for inviting me to come talk. It's always such a pleasure to get out of the studio for a day and have a chance to talk to people. Especially today being Earth Day. I looked up a little bit about Earth Day. It started in 1970 when I was 7 years old. And I really remember my childhood and my schooling. There was a lot of talk about, saving the planet and recycling, and it really embedded that in me as a person. I also learned that it was the one of the outcomes of the Earth Day movement was the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and that's when that started in conjunction with Earth Day. So I'm glad to be here. Okay, let me go to the next image. This is my life in a nutshell. So I teach at Eastern Illinois University. I spend a lot of time in my studio, and I'm really close, have a real close family. Before COVID, I used to sing a lot with different groups, and that was a really fun way to kind of gather, and hopefully we'll get back to that. I teach a lot of workshops. If you're ever interested in learning something about what I do, you can check out my website or email me about workshops. And this is me with a student group. I took what's it called? Study abroad to Indonesia. And that was one kind of a real highlight of being a professor at Eastern Illinois. I love basketry and I love baskets. I mean, look at them. They're just so sculptural and gorgeous. I love how they're translucent and also really sturdy. They're functional at the same time being sculptural. And I just think they're capable of really exciting shapes and textures. We're all really familiar with textiles. We wear it on our bodies. We're born into it and die into it. We wipe our mouths with fabric and sit on cushions made of fabric. So textiles and fibers and basketry are materials that the viewer is familiar with. When they come to my work, they have that material affinity, I think, embedded in their life experience. I also think it's really cool how old basketry is, that I'm extending a tradition that started over 27,000 years ago. It's just astonishing to me. And it's really remained unchanged. So every basket that you see in the world is made by a person. It is not a mechanized endeavor. So this is a basket. This was really recent. Maybe some of you saw this in the news. Recently, this basket was unearthed in Israel, I believe, and it dates back, they call it the world's oldest basket, and it dates back to 10,000 years ago. And it's really intact in a way that many ancient baskets aren't. And then it kind of got me interested in reading about how old the basket evidence is, and they have little scraps and imprints on ceramic objects that go back to as much as 27,000 years. So to be part of a tradition that extends from that is really exciting to me. And in a way, kind of subversive, I think, like doing something in such a technological contemporary world that we live in that harkens back to something that literally somebody would have been maybe creating in a cave. It's just astonishing to me. So my undergraduate degree was in fibers I started at University of Iowa in interior design, and then quickly switched to fibers and then transferred to Colorado State. And I learned about people like Magdalena Abakanowicz and Eva Hesse and other pioneers in the fiber arts movement. My undergrad teacher was Tom Lundberg, who's an amazing artist that focused on stitching and embroidery. And then when I started my graduate studies, I started working at Cal State Long Beach with Carol Shaw Sutton. And she's really the one that sort of transformed my thinking into what I wanted to do with my art making today. I transferred from Cal State Long Beach to the University of Illinois into their sculpture department. And at the time, and some of you probably can remember this, that there was this huge art versus craft debate going on in the art world. Is it art? Is it craft? And it all stemmed from sort of a hierarchical thinking about material, like marble and bronze are high art and clay and fiber are low art. Well, those barriers were really destroyed through the women's movement and in the 1960s and up till now. And when I got to the sculpture department at the at University of Illinois, they didn't really engage in that talk because they just accepted what I did as sculpture. And it was really nice to remove that, having to sort of justify yourself, remove that from the table so that I could really engage in concept-based work. So I moved, really all of my art making sort of was about ideas, not about functionality, because you could certainly follow the tradition of basketry in a functional realm. And then these are some of the people that I just love in the sculpture world. And some of them sort of are linked to fibers. Well, actually all these are now, of course, right? But fibers, if you pick up any sculpture magazine, you can't get through it without seeing something made of fibers or basketry. So my first work that I made was this technique that is called twining. And twining is a basketry, off-loom basketry technique, which I'll show you. I'm going to do a little demo of it at the end of the presentation. And the thing I loved about twining was that you could create three-dimensional forms that were hollow. So it doesn't have to have a form on the inside. It's just a relationship between, it's like a three-dimensional grid, if you will. So all these forms are hollow, and it had a lot of structural integrity. Like if you knock on it, it almost sounds like you're knocking on wood. Or if you push it in, I mean, you certainly can sort of crunch it or smush it, but it wants to pop back into the shape that it was made. And so that was really attractive to me. And I gradually learned to weave more and more complicated forms. These are three pieces I picked out because they are the three places I think art comes from, in some percentage or not. Like your head, like art that's really intellectual, your hands, art that comes from the making, and heart, art that comes from sort of an emotional underpinning. And many of works are a combination, or I think of them as combinations of various degrees of those sort of points of departure. This is a series of works that I made that are heads, and I was just trying to sort of explore different personalities or different facets of a person through making these head-like forms. I wanted to show you just a little bit of the work that I make. I make a lot of figurative work, but I'm kind of going to focus most of my presentation on works that sort of come from nature. So this is called Little Arm, and it was about leaving my daughter 2000, when she graduated from college and moved away. I drove her far, far away, and it was like cutting off my arm and leaving it far away. So that was what that's about. I also, after about 10 years or so of working in primarily just twining, I started branching out because I wanted forms that were softer and also more transparent. So I started playing with things like crochet and netting, which you can see here. Netting also is an extremely ancient art form, probably even predating basketry. So this net is big enough that probably 2 or 3 people could be inside of it. Right now it's sort of squished down, but you could stretch it out and we could all crawl in there together. I also do a lot of work that's groups of small things. I like the relationship of how the pieces talk to one another and playing with materials. This is, for me, I started this group called Mother Memory. I was asked to be in a show, and so I was thinking about the act of being a mother or mothering or being a child. And so a lot of these kind of refer to that conceptually. But then I like the way they look together as a grouping, and how the materials relate to one another and how the forms relate to one another. Oftentimes when we make work, we like, if you see a number of pieces by the same artist, you can understand a lot more about that artist than if you just see a single piece. And so I think that also happens within these small groupings. So when I was a little child, I lived with my family, of course, in Terre Haute, Indiana. And we had sort of a gully in the back of our yard. We lived at 103 Wren Road and in Terre Haute. And there was this ditch that became sort of a magical playground for me. This is not from that picture, I mean, from that place, but it's something I remember was at some point a tree overturned and there was this exposed root structure. And I got really into sort of looking at it, poking at it, excavating it, picking out things that were locked between the roots. And it started me really becoming interested in nature and interested in natural forms. Jumping way forward, this is from a show I did called Looming and Longing. And I really didn't think, oh, okay, now I'm going to do work about nature. But looking back at it and putting work together for this show, I realized that I oftentimes work with forms from nature that I think of in a metaphoric sense. So the piece, like this piece, for example, which is in the back of this picture here, is called Dark Clouds. And I wanted to make something that resembled sort of a cloud and sort of moved through the walls of the museum and floated in the air that you could walk around. And I really think the shadows are maybe more like clouds than the pieces themselves. But just like dark cloud is like the idea of something like impending problem or doom or something, a harbinger of something bad to come. And so that's kind of what this work was about. I made a number of these works this one's called Thicket. And what I did was I found tips of branches and I had this idea of what would it be like if a tree could just, like a blade of grass grows through a sidewalk. What if a tree could just grow from outside to the inside and permeate the spaces that we perceive as kind of solid, like those shows that you might have seen of what will happen if all the people disappeared, and the nature just kind of reclaims the planet. And so I did a number of these pieces in relation to that idea. Another piece, these pair of tornado kind of shaped pieces that I did for this show were called Looming. And again, it's like something about to happen, some impending danger. And I also like the way the word loom is embedded within that word. So these were large netted tornado kind of forms that they're like 12 at the top. The big one is maybe 12 foot in diameter. And I made them just hand knotted netting. And then I tied a little string to each of the intersections so that as you walked by, the little teeny strings would be like whiskers on a cat, like it would move and displace very easily depending on air currents. But while I was making this, in the middle of making this, I happened to be going to Florida, and I'd actually often dreamed of tornadoes just as probably people do. But I was on the coast, the panhandle of Florida, and out in the water, I saw this water spout, which I mean, I've never seen a tornado in my life. And then right in the middle of making this piece, I had this experience that just seemed to me like kind of solidifying this idea that of making something from nature. I don't know, it seemed like the world was telling me something, the benevolent universe. This is, now I'm jumping again. This is a group of work that I made about birds and murmurations, which are large groups of mostly starlings, people think of them. And so I started making birds, and I wanted to weave them, but weaving just really is a process that for the number that I needed, it would have been sort of a lifetime job. So I decided to weave some and then make molds of them and pour in ceramic slip into the mold. So this first group was made right around the what was it called? The Quetzalcoatl. It was the Mayan, the end of the Mayan calendar. And we often think, I mean, in my head somewhere, it's like the end of days is maybe like birds rain down from the sky. And so, so the piece in the upper left, this one here, was made at that time. And I was thinking of those ideas. And so I deliberately made the string like a black line so that I didn't want it to be invisible. I wanted it to be very visible. And they're at once kind of like a flock of birds, but they're also sort of like falling, but they're also sort of like swarming. I also think just birds are magical, the way when they fly, they don't, you know, they can move together as a group. And anyway, I became really captivated and interested in birds. And so this piece was called Passage, and there's actually 880 birds there. I know it looks like about 250, but it's not. And then that wasn't enough. So I had to make, for this installation, I upped it to 1,200. And this was this one was over your head. And this was really different because you could walk, you know, walk through it. It was about from knee high all the way to over your head. And then this is a little Rilke, a piece of a Rilke passage. Silently, the birds fly through us. Oh, I who long to grow, I look outside myself and the tree inside me grows. So this shows you a little bit of that process. So I would weave a bird like this, and then I would make molds. And then this is what they looked like coming out of the molds. And I was working at the ceramics facility at the time where I rented some space. And the guy that was running it said, "You don't really do ceramics, do you?" And I said, no, I'm a basket maker. He said, because this shape that you made is almost impossible in clay because I have these long wings that extend off this body. So every single one of them, you can see in this picture, had to be reinforced along the seams of the, like here's the wings. It had to be reinforced along those seams. And then I had to redraw the texture over all these seams. So this was actually, after I did those original bird projects, this was actually part of a commission that I did for a permanent installation. And this is the finished piece. It's called Taking Flight. And it's in a community college, actually here where I live. And in Illinois, we have this really great program called Percent for Arts in Architecture. And so this was part of that program. And that was finished, I think, in 2018. All right, back to the fallen tree. So I started when I was a child, and like most children, I think, collecting little things that are on the ground, looking at them, examining them, learning from them. And I mean, I grew up at a time there wasn't computers, and there really wasn't even anything on television. So I spent a lot of time outside. I just remember the mantra of my parents and everybody's parents was, you children go outside and play. And so we spent a lot of time doing that. And from that moment forward, I just started collecting things and amassing little vignettes and collections of objects and using them in play and, I don't know, sewing and in my grandma's sewing machine in the basement during the winter and making little fiber things. So at any given time, if you come to my studio, you'll see I have this big giant table, and you'll see arrangements of objects and things. I walk to my studio typically, so I'll find these metal bits that I think look very organic, or I'll find rubber O-rings or all kinds of different things. And then I'll make these little arrangements all over my table. And so I always thought it was just sort of, I don't even know what I thought it was. I didn't even really start taking pictures of them till Instagram, but it was just fun for me to move things around and look at relationships. And then I was invited to be in this show, and they said, well, we would love you to come and join in this show, but there's just this giant table in the middle of the room, and you can, put up whatever you want on the walls, but we can't move the table out of the room. And so I saw the space and I thought, well, I'm just gonna take my stuff that I typically collect and see if I can do something with this as more of an installation. So I made this piece called Made and Found. And I swear this is probably the most fun I've had making art, or I don't know, maybe ever. And so I just grabbed all my stuff, like things that I made, things that I found, things that are a combination of made things and found things. And I put them in boxes and took them to this, where the show was. And I just spent several days sort of arranging them in these little vignettes. And I liked the sort of blurred lines between things that were, some people would say, well, is that real, or is that something from nature, or is that something you made? And blurring those lines, I thought, was a really interesting idea. And here's a couple of details. Like these things, I don't know if you've ever seen these things before. I found these on the coast of Lake Michigan, and I called them sea balls, but I don't really know what they are. They were tumbling in this tide. And so I think because I've been to the Lake Michigan many times, and they're not there all the time, but at certain times of year, I think in the fall, they roll up and mat, and they get tighter and tighter till they're these ball shapes, which to me look like nests, but they also look like something I might make. And then, so all of these objects are things that I found, and some of them manipulated, like weaving, or I like to weave around stones or do netting around objects. Oh, there's my cat. So this is just another detail from that Made and Found. Actually, this is from a different Made and Found, because I've now put this piece together in different places. I think I've done it 3 times. And of course, every time it's different. I don't want to replicate it. I want to reconfigure it into new arrangements and think about things in different ways. And so, like, if I did a little scrap where I was trying out a stitch just as a sample, then I just save that, and it would become like a background for something. Or like, this is a piece of plastic that melted in my dishwasher, and it looks like this luminous sort of shell shape from the ocean. And speaking of the ocean, and so this is a series I began, and I'll move it. This is a really disturbing image, and I don't want to. I don't want to have you have to stare at it for too long, but I want to mention that I saw that image from Chris Jordan's. He was a artist and photographer who was at Midway Atoll Islands out in the middle of the Pacific, investigating albatross birds. And he was noticing that a number of the birds had died from ingesting. They fly along the surface of the water and scoop up food in their bills. And some of them perished from picking up too much plastic, or their little baby chicks did as well. And so I know I'd seen that picture before, but I looked at it with fresh eyes, and realized I don't know, I'm just appalled at thinking, I have to go back to it for a second, sorry. Thinking this lighter belonged to a person. It could have been, or like the lid of this bottle. If you've ever had a bottle of water, that could be your lid or mine, right? And it just is staggering to me that we're doing what we're doing to our creatures of our planet and our planet as a whole. So I wanted to make a series of work where I started thinking about this idea of becoming really responsible for everything that I am purchasing and throwing away. So I started making these objects, and I made one a month for 10 months and filled them with plastic, of all my plastic. So I saved it and cleaned it. It was clean. And then I would put it inside the form, and you can't, it's sort of like the body of that albatross. The body is beautiful. And someday this, certainly the plastic will outlive my weaving, and maybe it will break open and reveal its contents the same way as the albatross birds do on the Midway Atoll. So I wanted the viewer to be able to see what was inside of it. So I, right before the pandemic, I went and I just called the local college and said, the community college that teaches X-ray technology, and said, would you X-ray one of my pieces of artwork? And people are so cool in the world. If you reach out, and I don't know, she said, sure, bring it in. And so we X-rayed this piece, and I plan to X-ray all of them, but since then the program has gone virtual. But this is an example of, let's see if I have a detail, of the X-ray of that piece and all the objects inside of it. So here you can see a lid of something, and this is a plastic spoon. Some of these things are things I found walking to my studio. But yeah, most of it is stuff that I was discarding. So at this time, like I said, the pandemic was starting, and I, like everyone else, started making masks and meeting my students on Zoom and baking bread. And I had a ton of studio time, and I really kind of felt so guilty about it, because in a way it was like a COVID residency for me. I could be alone at my studio, and I was just going there and working and working and working, and continuing on this albatross project. So these are some examples of pieces from that series. And some of them, I also kind of was playing with this idea of sort of striping them, like almost like a timeline or levels, or I don't know. Sometimes I don't know exactly the reasons behind every little thing. I have to sit with it a while until I sort of figure it out. And like looking at this, you would never know that it's full of plastic detritus, So this is maybe 3 feet long. And I had friends saying, oh, do you want me to save plastic? And I said, no, you need to be responsible for your own plastic. I have plenty of mine. I'm having trouble being responsible for my own. I can't take on yours. But I think, starting this dialogue, I don't really want to make art filled with plastic garbage. I don't. I want to make, I want to, it's so easy to sort of ignore that problem, but I decided I can't visualize every time I throw something into the garbage, I think, what is that going to look like in, floating in the ocean? I just can't be responsible I have to find better ways. And so I'm trying to be very cognizant of what I purchase and where it goes and following it. I was just reading an article in the National Geographic about a circular economy, like that everything we make just becomes part of a circle that doesn't end. So there is no waste. And if you're interested in it, it's in the current National Geographic. But like this one is a very different form. It's kind of folded in on itself, like an elbow, kind of. Let's see how we're doing on time here. Getting there. So that's that piece. And I think that's the 10th one I did. So another project I did during the pandemic was, I just couldn't believe the number of people that were dying of COVID in the United States. And so I couldn't get my head around how many people 200,000 was. So I started doing this long project, and I measured out, these are like, you could think of weaving a sort of warp and weft, and these would be the warps, and the string crossing it would be the wefts. And I measured out over my head, like 6.5 feet of warps, and I started weaving. And I wanted to to see if I could, in some way, visually demonstrate what 200,000 looks like. This is a little side note here. If you ever are doing PowerPoint and you bring an image in, it sometimes suggests what caption you can put on it. And the caption for this particular piece was a feather on the ground. So I keep track of all these caption suggestions because I think, oh, that's kind of cool. One of it's like woman holding a chicken or something. It's just really, I don't know. It's like, how do they get there? But so this is how the piece progressed. And if you look at this, if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's how I'm counting it to demonstrate it, except I actually keep count of the rows versus the columns and just multiply it. But so as it grew, each of these little strings, can you see those little strings? That's 10,000 each of those. And I have my feet in there so you can get the sense of scale, because sometimes it's really hard to tell what scale you're looking at. So this is when it reached 100,000. That's what that red marker is. So this is 100,000 of these little marks of these. They're really not stitches. I kind of call them stitches, but they're just sort of twining movements, I guess. And I really thought that if I made this whole thing that was over my head, that it was going to hit 200,000. But obviously, this is only 100,000. And right now we have over 500,000 people that have died. And so that's what it looks like with me working on it. That's me in my studio. So it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it had to have its own chair. And I'm going to demo this process in a minute, but that's what it looks like working on it. And this is it. I don't have a picture of it completely finished, but this is almost done. And it's right now, it's going to be 144,000. Well, that it is. I finished it and bound off the top of it. And, but I couldn't believe it. It's not even, it doesn't, and it just is, to me, amazing that how many people we've lost, and I don't know, it's a staggering number. So I think this might be my last image. This last image is just a couple of rocks that I've twined around. And I think that borrowing things from nature, and I don't know, I think they're just so beautiful. I want to somehow encase them, and I feel like you can see their form even better with this grid of twining around them. And who doesn't love to pick up a soft, a rock that just feels right in your hands. So I sometimes make these these I can make in a much shorter period of time. And so it's fun to me to do that. Oh yeah, that's just my studio wall. So this is a piece, it's funny, I posted, I don't know if it was this piece, it's one of these pieces. I posted a piece like this and it just said, the caption was studio wall. And I had the Moss Art Center at Virginia Tech contacted me and said, we want to include your piece studio wall in our upcoming show. And which is funny because it's not a piece. I mean, it is literally my studio wall, but next month I'll be headed to West Virginia to install a wall of, I think I'm going to bring about 100 objects. So they'll be small and medium-sized and larger, and I want to go there so that I can arrange them on my way to Aramont to teach my workshop. So that's a little bit about me. Are you still there? I want to show,
Still here.
yay. I want to show you my, can I show you? I want to just do a demo for you if you want to see. I have it set up. I'm learning, we're all learning technology, right? So I have a little camera here, and hang on one second, I gotta back up and see.
Ann, while you're getting your demonstration together, I just say to all of us gathered here, if you have a question for Ann, please do raise your hand using the raise hand feature. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. When you hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see reactions. If you click on reactions, you'll be able to raise your hand and we'll be able to call on you. And you can put things into the chat as well. If it's just in the chat, we may miss it. So if you can raise your hand, that's better.
And I'm 100% okay if you unmute yourself and just scream out your question.
Excellent.
I'm really, I love, like if I was doing this in person, I love it when people ask questions in the middle, because I don't know if you're like me, but I forget halfway through. I think of questions, and if I don't say them right away, I forget it completely. All right, I'm plugging this in, and I think it'll switch over so that, well, is it switching? Did it switch? It's not switching yet. Oh yeah, there we go. All right, so let me get this set up right. So this is a piece, this is the technique that I do, and can you hear that? It's very hard. And the whole shape, the way you shape it, it just depends how many of these warp or spokes that you have relative to like to the circumference. So the more you add, the wider it will get. If I stop adding, it'll just go straight up from that from that circumference. All right, so this is how it's done. So you just take the left-handed, well, I don't know if it's backwards to you, but left-handed and behind the spoke, just like that. And you just alternate. It's a paired, instead of having a single weaver that goes over and under, it's a pair of them. And each time a different one crosses on top because they alternate. So that is all there is to it. Now you know about the technology. This is why it's such a simple technology that it was invented by many different groups of people all over the world, from the Hopi Native Americans to African people to Inuit and Northern American, well, not American, whatever. I don't know, what's the, like the Bering Strait cultures, to just all over the world, because it's such a simple idea. And it produces the Hopi people, and I believe there was another, I can't remember the other indigenous tribe, but that would make twined pieces that were so tight that they could hold water. And that was kind of a way that they judged the quality of the weaving. So, but just think about that. Like if each one of these is a person and a person and a person, I just can't get over the number of it all. All right, I'm gonna stop demonstrating.
Thank you for that, Ann. And wow, just absolutely inspiring and so perfect for Earth Day. And we do have a question from Kathleen McCabe. Kathleen, if you want to come off mute, that'd be great.
Okay, Ann, that was just fascinating. I loved your presentation, and also thank you, Visions, for providing this. So my question is, particularly when you were showing those large installations with the birds, and do you have a vision of your whole finished, piece before you start and figure out a way to do it? Or do you start making pieces and your idea grows as you work on it?
both in a way. For some pieces, it's evolutionary, but with a lot of the twining, you have to kind of know where you're headed. Like when you're measuring off and cutting your warps, it's really good to know where you're headed. With the bird project, I had to make for all 3 of the bird projects I did, I had to make a proposal. So I had to have a sort of a vision of where I was going with it. That being said, it always changes in the process, right? They're like, one thing I didn't know, for example, was when you hang the work, I hung that, with a crew of people and was making decisions that how close are they going to be together? How much space is it going to take up? How low, how high, all of those things are decided sort of in when you get to the location and you really see things in the space. So there is some flexibility. And then like with that permanent installation, it was nonstop problem solving from the start to the end, because it's hopefully, I hope it's going to be there many years. And so, but yeah, just figuring out what is it going to hang by? How long will that last? How do you attach the string to the birds? How do you attach the string to the ceiling? The whole thing is, and you got to just, I think as an artist, we're also sort of inventors, right? So we have to kind of figure things out as we go and trust that you can. And the more projects I do, the more risk I'm willing to take in terms of, taking something new on. Mm-hmm. But I try to constantly push my comfort limit, because if I don't grow as much, I think.
Okay, and I have another question. Do you ever hire assistants to help you? Like, for instance, making all those ceramic birds. Do you, like get a team to, make a whole bunch of birds for you because you're working on a different aspect of the installation or anything like that? So
with the bird, the permanent installation, it was a commission. So I proposed and I had the commission, and so I had funding. So I hired 2 people to help me make them. But I definitely was, I don't know. That was great having assistants. And then actually I hired another person to help me glaze. And then I hired a team of 3 or 4 people to help me install. And so, yeah, when I have the funding, I definitely hire people. And once in a blue moon, my university will give me a graduate assistant for a summer. And that's really cool too, to work with a grad student. And but I actually really love sort of the communal aspects of working on projects. I don't do it often, so when I do it, it's really a pleasure. So thank you.
Okay, one more question.
Yeah, sure.
What, when the basket you were just showing us as the demo, what material do you use?
Oh, that's a great question. I should have mentioned that. I mostly use waxed linen. And I get it from actually a electrical supply company. I kept thinking, oh, eventually I'll work in color, but I can't seem, what I thought it was, I'll just focus on form for now. And then eventually I'll introduce color into my work. Well, that was 30 years ago. So I'm still working on form, but I think I'm getting closer. But yeah,
thank you very much.
Yeah, they only have, that company I buy it from only has a couple of colors, so I just use what they've got. And those different stripes were like different dye lots.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I just
very effective.
Well, thank you. I just let it happen. Sometimes I try to really control things, and sometimes one must let go. Right?
Thank you for that, Kathleen. And also, I just want to make a little connection there. Kathleen is the local representative for SACWA, our regional representative in the San Diego area. And just so you all know, before we started the program this morning, and Ann and I were having a chance to chat, she mentioned that she's actually a part of a group working with SACWA on an upcoming traveling show. Thank you. So that's in conjunction with the National Basketry Organization. Ann?
Right. Yep, I'm a member of the National Basketry Organization, and I'm on the exhibitions committee and on their board. And so, yeah, we're working with SACWA. I can't remember. Tell Kathleen, what does that stand for, or whoever, Laura?
Wait,
I'll let
Studio
Kathleen.
Art Quilt Associates.
Studio Art Quilt Associates. So, yeah, the National Basketry Organization is going to be doing a show in conjunction with SACWA, and it's going to travel. I don't know where yet, and I don't even know if I'll be in it. I hope I am. Wouldn't that be cool?
That's good. And
Great.
Vanessa's just put the link up for the NBO, though, their National
Yeah.
Basketry there. So that's great. And
I would also love you guys, if you're interested, to follow me on my Instagram at AB Coddington.
we'll get that into the chat. And then for those of you who have been to our events before, you know, we always send out a follow-up email with additional resources and information. So you can look for that, and we'll have that there as well. So great. Our next question, I think, am I saying this correctly? Ayana? Okay, Ayana, if you want to come off mute and ask, that'd be great.
Yeah, I actually was also going to ask about the material you were using, but also curious how much you've tried using different materials with that technique, and sort of where the boundaries are of, have you run into materials that you can't make that work with, or, you know, because I also do a lot of found object art, and have been collecting things from the beach, including a lot of odd fibers, both natural and not. And yeah, I was just curious if you've explored that.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I have played a little bit with other natural materials. I should also say that this material is the waxed linen, the thin string. This is called ruby spring twine, and it's literally the twine that you tie springs with in upholstery. So ruby, it's from Italy. It looks like that hemp that you buy in rolls, but this doesn't degrade and get fuzzy the way as much. It does a little bit, but not like the hemp does. It is, I think it is a flax material, but it doesn't degrade. But I do a little bit of work with like raffia and found, you know, anything that can be made into a filament can be twined, right? And I know other people have used things like seaweed and kudzu and things like that. I generally don't harvest my own materials, but that's a super common tradition in basketry to harvest your own materials that you work with. But yeah, I've worked with cotton, linen, wool. I mostly do natural fibers, but I just bought this big spool. Maybe you noticed it in my studio wall. There was this sort of cream colored thing. This woman was selling this spool on Craigslist of something. She didn't even know what it was. And I'm sure it's like some kind of plastic. It's kind of like this thickness. And so I kind of an opportunistic maker. And I'm not opposed to using synthetics, especially if it's going to keep it out of a landfill, right? But that's a good question.
And thanks so much, Ayana. It's nice to meet you. Glad you were able to join us today. Our next questioner is Linda Chase.
Beautiful presentation, Ann. Thank you so much. I had a question about your birds. Do they move?
You know, they do.
Okay.
So the first place I installed it was in Cincinnati at the Weston, I think it's called the Weston Art Center. And they didn't tell me ahead of time, but they have, it's a art center that has like theater and music events, and they have 2 doors. And sometimes in the summer, they would open both doors and a wind would go through it.
Right.
And they were moving all over the place and clinking together. And it sounded like wind chimes. And I mean, it was one of those moments when you had to let go of control altogether. because I thought, are they going to break? Are they going to fall? You know, are they going to rain shards down on my viewers? You know, but I just, so yes, they move. And they also, like, the first two installations, they were hung on waxed linen. And so the linen would, I don't know, any little movement they would start, or any little air current, like even the vents started, you know, it would start moving them. And but the third installation, I used a coated braided steel, stainless steel cable, because I want them to not fall on people's heads. And even those will move quite a bit. Like I did a time lapse photo of a 24-hour period, and you can see them like twittering about, and people, they're like 10 feet. The lowest one is 10 feet overhead, so nobody can touch them, but they do kind of twitter about, and you know, it's kind of cool. I like that they move a little bit.
Well, that's great. I was hoping that you would say that.
Yeah.
Beautiful installation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I like the idea of the unintentional kinetic art.
Yes, right.
Really nice. That's really nice. I'm glad that they moved too, but like you said, you don't want them to break. We're coming up right to the top of the hour, which is usually when we start to wrap things up. If there are other questions, we definitely want to get to those. So if you still want to raise your hand, please do. Otherwise, I will exert director's privilege and just say, I really appreciated your comment about artists as inventors. Thank you so much for that. I think we all need to be reminded of that. And I also really appreciated your comments at the beginning about breaking this artificial distinction between art and craft, which I've come to see not just as quaintly annoying, but actually malicious. And I'm really grateful that it has gone, it is going away. And I think that textile art and fiber art is really leading the way with that. And that might have to do with your comment, your observation about the women's movement, the role of the women's movement and bringing about this new understanding. But like all of you, I'm just seeing articles left, right, and center about how art and craft, forget the distinction, and textile art as really being embraced as fine art when it is so incredibly conceptually driven. And it can still be functional, but that concept and the construct that you're bringing to this is really powerful. And I'm going to be seeing that, that wonderful bird for a long time. And thank you for your artistic commentary on that bird and for reminding us that while all things pass, unfortunately, plastic is going to endure a lot longer than those things that are the natural fibers and natural beings. So really important, if sobering, thing for us to be reminded of. And yet you've also given us so much hope to think about the beauty in the world and the way we can invent. So thank you. So yes, thank you so much for that, and thank you for sharing your artistry with us today. What a joy to have you with us. And if anyone else has more questions, please, great. Otherwise, we will say goodbye. And you'll see our follow-up email that will have the recording of this. And you've got Ann's Instagram and all of that. And we'll get the email out. And thank you so much for your generosity of spirit and being with us today. And we'll give you the last word. Ann, anything else you want to say to us today?
Thank you so much for coming. I spend so much time all by myself in my studio. I mean, hours, days, and years and months, and just to get out and be able to share what I do, it's a privilege for me and an honor to be able to see you guys and you know, thank you for your gracious attention. Also, the last little thing is just let's all be cognizant of our impact on the world and how the resources that we use and how we can be conscious and aware of what we're using and how we're using it and how we can lessen our impact and be gentle with the world, our natural world.
Absolutely, Ann. Thank you so much. And
you.
we'll look forward to seeing you at our next Visions Art Museum Zoom presentation, which already have one next Tuesday. So please go to our website and look under education and events, and we've got more opportunities to learn and grow together and to invent. So thank you for that. And yeah, thank you very much. Have a great day.